The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, hello everybody. Well, you know, Halloween is coming, which means, everybody, that we really want to hear your supernatural stories. So if you've had anything happen in your life, no matter how small you think it might have been, that you couldn't explain. Maybe you thought it had something to do with a ghost or a UFO sighting, or maybe even a cryptid. We would love to hear your stories. And if you email them to us, we will share them on our Halloween episode on October 30th. So all you have to do is just type up what happened to you in an email and send it to us at whereourmindswander@gmail.com.
Yeah, you may not know this, but we love hearing from our listeners.
We absolutely do, because it makes us, A, feel like we're not quite so alone, and B, it's just cool to bond over things like that.
Yeah, you're all part of the Wanderers family, so feel free to drop us an email.
So again, it's whereourmindswander@gmail.com. And if you could get your stories to us by October 20th, that would be fantastic, because then we will be sure to include them in our show on the 30th.
That we will. And don't forget to share our podcast with your friends and family. It helps us out quite a bit.
It does. And I mean, what better month than October to have everybody listen to a spooky podcast about all kinds of weird things?
Well, we got some weird things in this episode. This is a good one.
Yes.
It's the Omni Parker house.
Yes, in Boston.
And Beth's going to tell you the history. And then after the break, I'm going to go into some of the hauntings.
The many hauntings.
The many hauntings. This place is incredible.
Yep.
I know I say this a lot, but this one truly is. Everybody's been to this place.
Everybody that you could possibly think of. Writers, athletes, actors, presidents.
Yeah, and it's got some great hauntings.
So I'm going to get right into it.
Yeah, and with that said, go ahead, get comfy, dim the lights perhaps, and Beth's going to start us off.
The Omni Parker House in Boston has been an historical landmark since it was first built in 1855. The land it was built on, now the corner of Chapman Place and Bosworth Street, was once the site of the Boston Latin School, and then the Miko Mansion in the pre-Revolutionary days. Across the street is the historic King's Chapel and the oldest graveyard in Boston, which is said to be haunted. The hotel is made up of two buildings, the main hotel building and a 10-story annex. Over the years, famous writers, athletes, and 23 U.S. presidents have stayed there, giving it a rich history that goes far beyond its walls. And the ghost stories that are told about the Omni Parker house are legendary. The story of the hotel really begins in 1825, when a 20-year-old farm boy, Harvey Parker from Maine, arrived in Boston. His first job was as a stable hand, caring for a horse and a cow, which, according to Ghost City Tours, gave him an $8 a month paycheck. Soon, he was picking up even more odd jobs in order to survive life in the city, and he found himself working as a coachman for a wealthy Bostonian woman. In 1832, Parker, who was 27, had put away enough money to buy a little cafe that came up for sale for $432. He was a natural businessman, and within a few years his clientele included prominent Boston lawyers and newspapermen. Parker did so well that in 1854 he was able to purchase the Mico Mansion, which he had demolished, and he hired architect William Washburn to build an ornate 5-story Italianate-style stone and brick hotel in its place. The floors of the first 2 stories were marble, covered in luxurious carpets and horsehair divans. So Parker was definitely catering to the elite. Parker's was known for fine dining and luxurious rooms. He hired only the best chefs from Europe, and his bar offered exotic drinks like the sherry cobbler, the mint julep, the gin sling, and the timberdoodle. And in 1856, Chef Sanzian put together a completely original dessert. It was a pie, of sorts, made up of French butter sponge cake filled with pastry cream and topped with chocolate fondant. They called it the Boston Cream Pie. According to historyofmassachusetts.org, the Parker House became such a hot spot for local writers to get together that in 1856, the Saturday Club was formed. It was a group of writers, historians, scientists, and philosophers who held monthly meetings there. Some of the members were Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Charles Sumner, and Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. It's said that Longfellow worked on his famous poem Paul Revere's Ride at the Parker House, and the Atlantic Monthly magazine got its start there. Allegedly, Charles Dickens read aloud A Christmas Carol at the Parker House for the very first time. In fact, Charles Dickens lived at the Parker House for 2 years, beginning with his lecture tour of 1867 to 1868. He wrote to his daughter, quote, "This is an immense hotel, with all manner of white marble public passages and public rooms. I live in a corner, high up, and have a hot and cold bath in my bedroom, connecting with the sitting room, and comforts not in existence when I was here before. The cost of living is enormous, but happily we can afford it. I dined today with Longfellow, Emerson, Holmes, and Agassiz. Longfellow was here yesterday, perfectly white in hair and beard, but a remarkably handsome and notable-looking man." End quote. Other writers who stayed there include Mark Twain, Willa Cather, Edith Wharton, and Nathaniel Hawthorne. Henry David Thoreau stopped by too, but according to his journals, he actually didn't like it very much, saying, quote, "As for the Parker House, I went there once when the club was away, but I found it hard to see through the cigar smoke, and men were deposited about in chairs over the marble floor as thick as legs of bacon in a smokehouse. It was all smoke. The only room in Boston I visit with alacrity is the gentleman's room at the Fitchburg Depot, where I wait for the cars sometimes for 2 hours in order to get out of town. It is a paradise to the Parker House, for no smoking is allowed. I am pretty sure to find someone there whose face is set the same way as my own." End quote. By 1860, Parker was ready to expand again, and he ordered the demolition of the old horticultural building next door so he could add on a 6-story annex to the hotel. 3 years later, he added another 10-story annex, and in 1866 he added yet another smaller one. The Parker House Hotel was now massive. The 1860s brought even more famous guests to the hotel, including Mary Todd Lincoln, who was in town to visit her son Robert at Harvard. Ironically, John Wilkes Booth also spent quite a lot of time in the Parker House, and in July of 1864, he met there with Confederate secret agents to hatch a kidnapping plot. He would kidnap President Lincoln. 10 days before Lincoln's assassination, guests at the Parker House allegedly saw Booth practicing his pistol shooting at a nearby shooting gallery. But on a lighter note, during the 1870s, when one of the bakers at the hotel had an altercation with a guest over the state of the dinner rolls, he threw them back in the oven, and when he pulled them back out, they had a folded shape that made them crispy and buttery on the outside, but light and fluffy on the inside. These became the signature rolls at the Parker House. They were so popular that, for a while, the Parker House shipped them to other hotels and restaurants all around the country. Chefs at the Parker House also coined the word scrod for the first catch of the day. By the late 1880s, Harvey Parker had hired a hotel manager named J. Reed Whipple. When Parker passed away in 1884, at the age of 79, he didn't have any children, and in 1891, Whipple completely took over the running of the hotel. In 1912, Whipple hired a new cook's helper, who worked in the basement pastry kitchen of the hotel for 1 year. The man's name was Ho Chi Minh. The marble-topped pastry table that Minh used is still at the hotel today. Whipple was able to purchase the Parker House in 1920. When Whipple bought the hotel, he immediately renovated it, both inside and out. The new Parker House was even more impressive than the one Harvey Parker had built. To commemorate the new hotel and its new beginning, when it reopened in 1927, the hotel's manager, Claude Hart, and his secretary, Alice Mulligan, got into a private plane, flew over Boston Harbor, and tossed the old hotel keys into the water as they flew by. At the height of the Great Depression, according to historichotels.com, Whipple could no longer afford the mortgage, and basically he lost the hotel to the bank, which then sold the hotel to Glenwood Sherrard for $3 million. Under Sherrard's watchful eye, the Parker House continued to bring in famous guests, like Judy Garland, Ted Williams, and James Dean. 23 American presidents have stayed there, including Grant, McKinley, and both Roosevelts. But in 1946, a young politician named John F. Kennedy launched his very first political campaign from the Parker House. He proposed to Jackie in the dining room at table 40 and had his bachelor party there in 1953. In the 1940s, the hotel employed a busboy named Malcolm Little, who later renamed himself Malcolm X. Chef Emeril Lagasse also worked there as a sous chef from 1979 to 1981, but I'm getting ahead of myself in our timeline a little. Andrew Sherrard, Glenwood's son, unfortunately made some bad business decisions after his father's death, and the Parker house nearly went under. But in 1968, it was bought by the Dunphy Corporation, which oversaw its resurgence as a premier hotel. Omni is the Dunphy Corporation's luxury hotel brand, which they began in the 1980s. Known as the Omni Parker House since 1996, the new management brought some changes, like reducing the 800-plus guest rooms down to just 530, so they could offer a better guest experience. Today, the Omni Parker House is still a luxurious hotel, and it takes pride in being the longest continuously run hotel in Boston. But it also holds the title of one of Boston's most haunted. And Wes will get into that after this quick break. Hey, did you know? Vampire graves have been found in Bulgaria, Poland, and Croatia. In fact, over 100 have been discovered in Bulgaria alone. These vampire graves range from the 13th to the 18th centuries and often include sickles across the neck, iron bars through the chest, and in some cases, a brick wedged in the mouth. But in 1998, a neurologist in Spain offered a rather interesting explanation for vampiric behavior. Rabies. The symptoms of rabies in humans can explain nearly all the vampire-like behavior described in historical accounts, including the sensitivity to light in certain foods and disruptions of sleep patterns. And believe it or not, 25% of humans infected with rabies have actually bitten other people. Who'da thunk it?
All right, we are back from the break. And as promised, I'm going to tell you all about the hauntings. The Omni Parker House has been talking about its ghost, at least publicly, since the 1940s. There are several hot spots in the hotel, including the 10th floor, the 3rd floor, and in front of the haunted mirror. The ghosts that are believed to haunt the hotel range from Charles Dickens to Harvey Parker himself. Harvey Parker, while being an impeccable businessman, could also be a little cantankerous. It was well known that he wasn't very fond of the King's Chapel across the street, and once remarked that he'd like to have it torn down, since, quote, people have little use for places like that these days, end quote. When one of his new annexes was casting a shadow over the chapel, he allegedly bought several crystal chandeliers and gave them to the chapel so that they'd have enough light to see by. But he loved his hotel, and he cared very much about the comfort of his guests, which may be why he still hangs around 141 years later. According to BostonGhost.com, in 1992, former bellman John Brem was interviewed in the Boston Globe about his ghostly encounters at the hotel. Brem had been employed there since 1941. One time, he saw a ghostly figure wandering around the 10th floor annex that he believed was Harvey Parker. But he wasn't the only one who has seen the apparition. Guests at the hotel had asked about the heavy-set man with the dark mustache that they had seen roaming around the 10th floor. They said that the man had vanished without a trace. Brem said that over the years, they often got calls from guests complaining about noises coming from room 1040. But the front desk knew that room 1040 was unoccupied every time. Regardless, they'd send someone up to check anyway, and the room was always completely empty. One night, while a security guard was doing his usual rounds, he thought that he saw someone walking towards him. The person's shadow was cast onto the wall. The guard stopped, waiting for the person to come around the corner, but no one ever did. He didn't hear anyone open any doors, so he was confused as to where the person could have gone. It was then that he realized that the shadow that he had seen was wearing a stovepipe hat. There was also the time that a mother and her young daughter were staying in room 1012. The younger girl happened to wake up just as the sun was coming up, and as the light was coming into the room. She could see a man dressed in clothes from the 1800s standing at the end of her bed. The man had a kind smile on his face and asked, "Are you enjoying your stay?" before he faded away. The young girl wasn't frightened at all. She actually felt rather comforted by his kind demeanor. But when the two of them headed down for breakfast, the young lady was a little amazed when she passed a portrait hanging on the wall, and she recognized the man as the one she had seen in her room. It was Harvey Parker. Brem also shared an encounter that happened in 1950. An elderly woman was staying in room 1078. She described seeing some sort of gray mist in the room that began to take the shape of a heavy-set man. It turned and looked at her, and she could see that he had a dark mustache. She didn't say anything, and the apparition didn't either. But it scared her so badly that she went down to the main lobby and requested that security come check her room. They did, of course, but they didn't find anything. Another common complaint on the 10th floor is the constant sound of a rocking chair rocking back and forth in the adjacent rooms. Guests have called down to complain about the incessant noise because it was so loud that they couldn't sleep. Of course, the front desk always sends someone up to check, but they know what they're going to find. Absolutely nothing, since they don't have a single rocking chair in the entire hotel. Or, instead of rocking chairs, guests have complained about loud laughter and even loud whispering right in their rooms, as though an unseen guest is sharing the room with them. Orbs have been seen floating down the hallways, and lights sometimes flicker in the rooms on the 10th floor also. The strangest thing about the apparition of Harvey Parker is that sometimes guests and employees as well have described him as wearing colonial-era clothes, even though he didn't come to Boston until the 1800s. No one is sure why Parker would wear clothes from a much earlier era. One explanation, of course, is that it's not always Harvey Parker that people are seeing. And in some cases, it really does sound like there has to be two different ghosts, since guests have also claimed to hear friendly and happy conversations in the hallway right outside their door. But when they've looked, there wasn't anyone there. These ghostly conversations always seem to take place at the exact same time in the morning. The 3rd floor is also a hot spot, but not because of Harvey Parker. According to Ghost City Tours, Elevator 1 consistently stops on the 3rd floor, and the door opens, despite anyone having pushed the button to activate it. There's never anyone inside the elevator either. Now, there's some debate over who exactly is haunting the 3rd floor. When reporter Becca Hensley stayed on the 3rd floor in 2010 while working on an article about haunted Boston, she experienced the weird elevator phenomenon for herself. She wrote, quote, "My elevator sends itself several times to the 3rd floor, though I don't push the button. And when I arrive, nobody is waiting. Ah, yes, says the woman at the front desk, as if it's nothing. That elevator's been doing that since Charlotte Cushman died there." End quote. Charlotte Cushman was an actress back in the 1870s, and during the height of her career, she lived at the Omni Parker house. She had breast cancer, and while she was out walking one day, she also came down with pneumonia. She passed away on February 18th, 1876, in a room on the third floor. But the ghost on the third floor could also be a liquor salesman who took his own life in room 303 in 1949. For years, guests staying in room 303 had complained about the strong smell of both cigar smoke and whiskey suddenly filling the room. Or they'd complain about very loud laughter inside the room with them that they couldn't explain. At times, the bathtub faucets would turn on by themselves, and the tub would fill with water. Eventually, though, room 303 was turned into a storage closet. Whether this was because there were so many guest complaints about the paranormal activity has never been confirmed. One thing that has been confirmed is that Stephen King has never stayed at the Omni Parker House, and he did not base his short story 1408 on room 303. But one writer who did live on the third floor and is rumored to still be there is Charles Dickens. Dickens, however, was a heavy cigar smoker and an avid whiskey drinker, so his spirit could have also been behind the cigar and whiskey smells in room 303. Now, to be clear, both Charlotte Cushman and Charles Dickens stayed on the third floor before the hotel was completely renovated, so room 303 is not specifically where they stayed, but they did both stay in the same original third-floor room. When the renovations happened, the door to Dickens' suite and the mirror from the room were saved, which, by the way, would have also been Cushman's suite later on. Both of the items are on display in the hotel today. And the place people claim to actually see Dickens' ghosts is in the haunted mirror. Apparently, when Dickens stayed at the Parker House during his lecture circuit, he would practice his speeches in front of the mirror. He also allegedly practiced his reading of A Christmas Carol in front of the mirror as well. The mirror now hangs in the main building next to the press room. It's 4 feet wide and 6 feet tall, with an ornate gilt frame. It has been authenticated by the Boston Dickens Fellowship as being the actual mirror Dickens practiced in front of. And, apparently, he's still practicing to this day. Employees especially have claimed to see Dickens' apparition standing behind them when they've cleaned the mirror, and in one case, as mentioned in Sam Baltrus's book, Haunted Boston Harbor, an employee had quite the scare. As the employee was cleaning the mirror one day, condensation, as if someone was breathing over his shoulder, kept showing up on the glass. There's also lore that if someone says his name 3 times while standing in front of the mirror, you'll see his apparition. Or, if you say his name 3 times up on the 3rd floor, Elevator 1 will arrive, ding, and open its door. So, it is possible that all 3 of them, Charlotte Cushman, the liquor salesman, and Charles Dickens, are haunting the 3rd floor. But to honor Dickens, the staff at the Omni Parker always hang a wreath on his former door at Christmas time. The Omni Parker House is known to be a haunted hotel, so of course there are plenty of guests who stay there that know that. Now, I'm sure some of the guests stay there because they want to have a ghostly encounter. But it's different if you work there and have heard the ghost stories for years. You're either a believer or you're not. In the case of Seamus Murphy, the manager of guest services, he had worked there for 22 years without experiencing anything spooky. But then one night in 2010, that all changed. Murphy was preparing for an event at the hotel, and he had gone into the mezzanine level storage room to grab the podium. While he was in there, he heard a, quote, gruff voice yell out, "What do you want?" Now, at first, he thought it was another worker, but as he came back out of the room, he realized that he was all alone. Plus, he had recognized the voice. It was the bell captain that used to leave the hotel after his shift, go get a few drinks, then return to the hotel where he'd sleep it off in the storage room. Murphy said, quote, "Yeah, it really sounded like him, except for the fact that he's dead," end quote. So, if you find yourself Googling the most haunted places in Boston, most, if not all lists, include the Omni Parker House. Some bill it as number 1. But for those of you who are into Boston's history, it's also an amazing historical landmark that began with a farm boy from Maine with nothing but a single dollar bill in his pocket.
That's amazing.
That's why I love this story.
It's amazing that these people arrive in the city in the 1800s with nothing, and they build these freaking empires.
Like 4 years later.
I know.
I mean, he came with nothing, and 4 years later, look what he made for himself, which is just incredible, the drive that it takes to do something like this. And look at this guy. His employee and him, well, basically, they made the first Boston cream pie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, but look at the dinner roll side hustle he had going on. A simple mistake turned into a blessing.
Right.
Which launched him also.
Right. And no wonder he wants to hang around his hotel 141 years later. He wants to make sure that stuff is being done right.
Well, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah.
I mean, we've said this before. I mean, this happens quite a bit, supposedly. People are looking after what they love the most.
And put all of their time and sweat and tears into.
Right. Who wouldn't hang around?
Right.
Well, the Omni Parker House sure seems to have it all going on.
Yes, it does. I was not able to find out how much they charge per night for a room, however, because when I went on the site to try to find out, I think it's like beyond the money that, you know what I mean? Like you go to book a room and it tells you how much it is per night. I could never actually get to that, so I think it may be a little pricey.
Yeah, but it's well worth it.
I think so, yeah.
Because look at all the famous people that have walked those halls, stayed in those rooms.
Mm-hmm.
You'd feel like you're part of history.
For sure.
I wouldn't mind going having a cigar and a
Timberdoodle?
glass of whiskey. Timberdoodle, that is awesome.
A Timberdoodle. I don't know what that is either, but...
Oh, it sounds like an excellent drink.
Whatever it is.
But who wouldn't want to go there and sit back and just enjoy the ambience?
Mm-hmm. Wait for the elevator to arrive.
I know. I think I'd pull my chair right up to the elevator and just wait. Get my cigar out, put my drink in my hand, put my feet up, make myself at home.
Have your camera ready.
Yeah. Who knows what you're going to see? Well, Beth, I think that about wraps it up for this episode.
I agree. And as always, if you would like to know more, you can always check our show notes for our sources on the Omni Parker House. There's a ton more history, of course, that we didn't go into.
And with that said, join us again next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
See you soon. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
And thank you all for your continued support.
See you next week for an all-new episode.